Welcome to Go Lurk Yourself, a podcast about streaming and playing video games on the internet. And sometimes we talk about movies and TV shows and The Simpsons. I am Crunky.
And I'm Real Amanda.
Hey, Amanda, how you doing?
I'm very, very good.
Welcome back.
How are you?
I'm great. Longtime listeners of the show know that I'm a... Well, they may not know. I don't know if we've ever talked about Star Trek on here before. I know Amanda and I have both, when we first met, we talked about how much we love Star Trek, and when the new Star Trek Picard was announced, we chatted about the trailers and fanboyed and fangirled over all the new stuff in it, and we were talking about, was it Thursday when the new episode premiered this week?
Yeah.
And we were Amanda sends me this message. Oh my God, we have so much to talk about. I go, you know what? We're going to do it on the podcast because.
I took notes live notes while I was watching. And also, I believe the very first episode I was on, you were talking about Outer Wilds. And that's when I think half of that podcast is us talking about how much we want a Star Trek video game, a good Star Trek video game, and how Outer Wilds reminded you of like Star Trek away missions and stuff.
Yeah, you're right. I had forgotten about that. But speaking of Star Trek video games, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Give me a number, a realistic number of a guess of how many Star Trek video games you think there have been made.
5.
Okay, let's try again, but understand that they've been making them since the 70s.
Oh, really? Okay. A dozen.
Okay, now take that number times 8.
What?
Well, it's like 90-something. There's been 90-something Star Trek video games made.
Are you kidding me?
I wouldn't even joke about Star Trek. Well, actually, I would, but
I can
no.
think of 2. I can think of the VR Bridge Crew game, and Star Trek Online.
Okay,
and then I figured there was a handful that I didn't know about.
Well, just on PC alone, there's like 40, and I'm talking like DOS, Apple I, Apple II era. So 1971, there was this is all for the listener who's like, this is a video game podcast. What are you guys doing talking about Star Trek? Listen, you just go with it, okay? Listen to all of what we have to talk about. We're going to talk some video games. We're going to talk about Star Trek, but there are tons of Star Trek video games. There was a text-based game in 1971 on the original PC it wasn't even PC. It was just computer platform. There was a script game made for the PDP-10. You remember the PDP-10 in 1972? Yeah, me neither.
I was born at the end of the 80s, but yes, I definitely remember.
There was a 1973 basic programming text game. It wasn't until like the 1981 Star Trek game that came out on DOS that started to like have graphics and things like that, and some like cheap EGA graphic pictures and mostly text,
like Myst.
Exactly. Well, no, before that, like black screen with
tons
of text,
think of old videos,
but like ASCII character arts.
Oh, gotcha. So,
did you know there was an Atari 800?
I did not.
There was a Star Trek game on there as well.
I'd like to argue, for anybody who's not a Star Trek fan, you have to understand that Star Trek really was the inspiration for probably 90% of the science fiction you've seen, whether it's in video games or TV or movies. So many of those sci-fi tropes come from Star Trek, and you probably don't even realize it. And even ideas for things that are regular manifested, in our everyday lives, like cell phones and things like that, were inspired by Star Trek. Their, engineers grew up watching Star Trek and said, I want to make a communicator. I want to make automatic sliding doors, and all of these things came from Star Trek. So many of the sci-fi games you play are so heavily inspired by Star Trek, and you don't even know it.
Amanda might be too young to remember this, but on DOS and Macintosh and the Amiga, Interplay put out a game in 1992 called Star Trek: The 25th Anniversary, and it's literally the first Star Trek game I can remember playing. Like personally, it was on a friend. I was at a friend of mine's house. He had a modern computer in 1992 because I had a computer, but nothing that could run anything that good. And it's basically the TOS, the original series, Kirk and Spock and McCoy, and you'd be on the ship and you'd beam down to planets and you'd have like a little investigative thing. It was not great, but it was good. It was, you know, for its era. There was also some Star Trek games on Windows and Macintosh and some DOS games that were in TNG. And then the next Star Trek game I played was on the SNES, I believe, or the NES. I don't remember, but there was a next generation game on the SNES that was not great, but it was fun.
I think that sometimes if you're a fan of a world, you'll sometimes overlook certain
absolutely.
downsides. You won't nitpick as much if it's a world that you just are desperate to be in.
So one of the best, as a fan of Star Trek, one of the best games I ever played was on PC. We're talking early 2000s, maybe 2002, a game called Bridge Commander. And you literally, it was a first-person perspective game. You sat in the captain's chair of the Enterprise D or one like it, and you had people at all the stations, and you would lean to them and you would give them commands, and you had to warp around and do missions. And it was unlike any Star Trek game that had come before, because before then every Star Trek game was like trying to make a RPG or an action game in Star Trek universe, and it never felt quite right. Or it was a what is the tabletop game that everybody plays now with a resource management game?
Catan?
Settlers of Catan.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of games that were kind of grid-based board games brought to video games, but Bridge Commander was the first one that, and I think is what the inspiration for what was Bridge Crew later on in like 2017. That was the one where you like, I know Bridge Crew had like VR, and you could literally touch the panels and things like that, but it was the one that like it came out in 2002, and there's still like an active mod fan community making it playable on today's computers and putting all kinds of crazy like fan made content in it. You know, the weirdos.
Yeah. You know what? So much fan content has turned into IPs. You know, people start being inspired by a game or modding a game, and then it turns into something else. So
like Dota 2 and
PUBG was an H1. You know what I mean? Like so many newer games were inspired by or started as mods of existing games. So never knock a good game mod.
No, I never, not me. I'll knock a bad one.
I'm wagging my finger at the critical listener.
All right, listeners, if you're still listening to us and we haven't been too hostile with you for not liking Star Trek or not liking us talking about it, we're actually going to talk about video games now. And I'm glad you mentioned PUBG mods, because in the What Have We Been Playing Lately, I'll go ahead and go first. I've been playing the brand new update to PUBG. I say been playing. I probably got 4 hours into it total in a week, because I'm still playing the game I talked about last week, which is Horizon Zero Dawn, like ad nauseum. But I'm still in love with the game. But I did take a break this week and played some PUBG. The new map. Have you seen any details about it at all?
I watched the trailer. It looked very siegey. And Rainbow Six Siege, I should say. And I have considered is it still on the test server?
No, it's on live server.
It's live. Okay. So when I had seen the trailer, it was only on the test server, and I didn't want to install the test server just for that. But I've considered reinstalling PUBG for this new game mode.
Well, before you go crazy, I'd love for you to come play it. You and I should play it sometime, because I think I could show you its positives and help you avoid some of its weaknesses. That's a dream, though. Maybe you'll still hate it, but or not enjoy it as much, because you don't really like the genre.
I would enjoy any time spent with you.
Oh, that's so nice of you. But there's a game, or the new game mode is not like Siege at all. The trailer makes it look like it's Siege, but what they did is they put a few destructible walls in there. They put C4 that's really just a remote detonator. You don't actually get to detonate. Choose when it blows up.
Oh,
you throw it
like
and it just counts
dynamite.
down. Yeah, and then there are in some environments there's some walls you can shoot through, but it's like the game mode it's still PUBG. So the map, if you guys ever played the original, is like this 8x8 grid, and 100 people drop on this great big island, and the circles shrink up, and if you're outside the circles, you get damaged and you can get killed. So the game kind of forces everyone to the middle or to wherever the circle ends up. Then you fight to the death till there's one person left.
Sounds like a family Christmas.
It is. And they put out another map, which was a desert map, and people were liked it. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it's been generally positively received, even though it's not my favorite map. There's a third map that came out that was a half the size map instead of an 8x8, and each block is like I want to say a square kilometer. So it's big in Game World. Yeah. Like you couldn't run across it in time for the match. You from one to the other on foot. So the second one came out. It was smaller. It was 4x4. They still dropped 100 people on it, and it was insane. Action was crazy. They put a lot more cover on it, and the games were a little bit faster. But people, after you played long enough, people said they got what they call third party. You'd be having a fight with somebody, and you'd always get shot in the back. Either people would kill you while you were shooting, or they'd wait till you were looting and kill you. So then they put out a snow map that was the same, or that was like a middle ground. It was a 6x6 between the 4x4 and the 8x8 size maps, and people hated it for multiple reasons. The snow made it, performance-wise, it had this weird sound on it. People didn't like it for a lot of reasons. You stood out on the snow like crazy. You could see people from a mile away. There's no place to hide. So they came out this recently. They actually got rid of the snow map. They took it out. I couldn't believe they took a map out that they've spent all that time making, but they did. And they put in this newer map that is 2x2. And instead of 100 people dropping on the island, it's 64. And it's really, from what I've played, its performance is way better because of it. Instead of having to render 100 people, the server can focus on the 64 that are there. It doesn't have as much terrain to render. The game, performance-wise, is amazing. Like, I couldn't believe it. Felt like a new game. And a couple other big things that they changed about it. And I know this is really boring if you don't like PUBG, Amanda.
No, go ahead and finish in that, because I have some responses, but I'll wait for you to finish.
They put this new map is like a donut almost. It's a circle in the middle. It's an island, and it's a circle. Well, quasi-circle, and all the loot and houses where everything is on the outside. The middle is kind of like a battleground, but there's not a lot of loot there. It's low value loot zone, so it really forces you to. You land in in that game, what you would call a hot drop is a place that's a high value loot. And the old maps, there were only a couple of them. So when everyone would try to land there and get the high value loot, fight your way out. Yeah. In this mode, it seems that it's more medium value loot at the drop zone. So it's always kind of a lukewarm drop instead of always a hot drop or nothing. Nothing's worse on the old maps than landing at like a 5-house town, and you have a pistol and a med pack, and that's all you got at the end of it.
And a level 2 helmet.
And you'd be lucky to have a level 2 helmet. You're lucky to have a helmet. But
we had one helmet. It was level 1, and we were happy with it.
Exactly. So the first match I played of it, and this is not me bragging, I've not played this game in 6 weeks. In fact, all the Siege I've been playing is kind of working against me because it controls so differently. When I went to shoot my gun, I'm just trying to aim, and I'm aiming all over the place. I can't hit anything. But I got to top 5. I was either, I think I was 6. I think there were 5 people left when I died, so I was top 6. Which, top 10% after not. It was a fun time on that map. But what I realized is they've severely cut down on the wait times to get in. The fact that you drop and get looted up pretty quickly, and it leads to more interesting in between fights. It looks like, or it feels like to me after playing it for about 5-6 hours, is that they've put a lot of care and thought into making it more even playing experience instead of it being either feast or famine. I think I've heard you mention this before on the older maps that you'd run around for days just looking for loot, and then you'd have one fight and it's over.
Yeah,
and they've kind of gotten away from that. Go ahead.
So the reason why I'm really looking forward to trying PUBG again with this new map, and you've kind of touched on all the notes. Firstly, one of the things that I didn't like about original PUBG was that you spent so much time running around and even looting. Like, you get amazing guns, but you may not see somebody for a long time, and until the very, very end, your top 10 without, I used to routinely, when I played it, get to the top 10 without encountering another player, it felt like.
Yeah.
And you hear gunfire and you kind of head towards the gunfire to get a little action, and it was a little too slow for me. Additionally, I had a lot of issues on PC with, now I will say that I play PUBG on Xbox as well, but on
Ooh,
and
gross.
obviously I call it the running simulator.
Right.
Because that's on Xbox, on console, and on PC it's the same thing. You loot up and run to find somebody and it takes forever, or you spend 20 minutes like looting, running, and then one shootout and you're gone. So having a smaller map, a better load, like having it run better on my PC would be amazing. For some reason PUBG has always, anytime I get into a firefight, it's framey. You had to send me this, phone book sized guide to get it to run okay. And like 17 YouTube videos that have conflicting information about, what settings to use to get it to run properly. And I just was, I love, there's a lot of other shooters I like to play. And
Right.
So I have just been playing those and uninstalled PUBG completely and just never thought of it really again. It's off console, and the new map brings in, it really seems to fix all the nitpicks I had about it. The spending a ton of time looting, running around, never encountering other players. It seems to have completely changed the pace and changed the just technical quality of the game for for everybody's rigs. So I'm really looking forward to maybe trying it out again with you.
How long ago did you try it? Just on PC last?
On
Is it over a
PC?
year? Because they've had
couldn't
some
tell
technical
you.
updates that have really increased the game's performance.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I've played on console pretty recently, but I haven't played on PC for a while.
From what I understand, the console version still doesn't run that good.
I mean, the only thing is I don't get as bad FPS drops.
Right, because they basically nerf it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I remember when it launched, watching the YouTube videos of people like landing, and then all of a sudden a house would just appear on them and kill them instantly.
Well, I've been playing so much Call of Duty and Siege because those are so they hit Siege especially hits that sweet spot where it's been the time that you have to accomplish your goals is just enough time.
Yeah.
And you don't loot up. You don't, you have your loadout ready. You go in with a plan and you take care of business in 3 minutes or less.
Right.
So it really hits a sweet spot for me. I know you have a joke.
No, I'm not going to say it.
And likewise with Call of Duty, like I drop in with my whole loadout and, run and kill people without any hunting or anything.
Absolutely. PUBG offers a unique gaming experience, and I agree that it's completely different from COD and from basically any other shooters. And it's one of those things that, like you said, early on when the game was brand new, it felt more exploratory and interesting and neat. But after it's been kind of boiled down and that like, hey, it's been 10 minutes. I don't have a decent enough gun. I'm toast. You just know it's like you get used to it. But that's enough about PUBG. I could talk about PUBG all day long if you don't stop me. But what game have you been playing lately? Or games?
I have been playing, besides, our regular contingent of games.
Right.
I have been playing almost every single night the past week and a half. I've been playing a game called Astroneer, which has been out for a while, and it's had some recent updates. There was a holiday update recently, and then there was something they called the Explorer update in the fall that added some extra things like a jetpack and stuff in. But basically, if you don't know what Astroneer is, think of a very calm Minecraft-esque space survival game. So you land on an uninhabited planet. You have this tool that kind of looks like a gun, but it hoovers up supplies and materials that you can use to build things. You can mine materials and then craft items. But the difference is that very, very few recipes early on, and you unlock them as you gain research throughout as you progress through the game. And you gain these, they call them bytes. That's sort of the currency, the bytes. And you get these bytes by collecting different objects from the world and putting them in a research chamber that sort of analyzes them and gives you data. And you can use that to unlock or research new new things, and you advance by learning how to build new machines that can do things like condense the atmosphere, so you can pull gases from the atmosphere. You can pull materials from all the debris you've sucked up from the planet, and then you can build rovers. You can tunnel to the center of the earth. It's kind of like Minecraft, and it's pretty open-ended.
Yeah, I played it like, I want to say last fall.
Yeah.
I was on Steam sale and I picked it up. I may have refunded it because I played it by myself. I didn't play it with friends. Yeah. I think there's a multiplayer now, but what I loved about that part you're talking about making all the upgrades is you'd like make these really cool devices back at your camp. Mm-hmm. And like, if I remember, it's the game where as you run away from camp, you have to like trail behind you an oxygen line.
You tether, or if you have a rover. I have a pretty big truck now, and it has its own oxygen on it, so I don't really need tethers. But early on in the game, does it look
like that new square or boxy truck?
The truckla? I call it the truckla. Yeah.
But yeah, I loved the little like you'd make this thing that would like extract atoms, and then you'd like add on to it, and at the end you'd have this like functioning like cycle of things that would automatically feed themselves. So really,
exactly.
Really funny.
And I just put a drill attachment on my truckla so I can drill down. It looks like a big front end loader. It's pretty amazing. And I have what I call the different items, the different objects that you research. They'll be like plants or minerals or something, but I call them just science. And I'll say like, okay, I'm putting the science trailer on my truck, and I'm gonna go find some science, and I'll go all throughout the world and come back with like 8 items to research. But along the way I've filled up my backpack with debris that I've found like really good. Like I might find an abandoned, broken down tractor with like a wind turbine on it, and I'll take that with me or whatever. And I come back with this truck just loaded with stuff, and then I put it all to work, and it's so fun. It's very
it kind of reminded me of, it's not exactly the same, but kind of in the same vein as like what No Man's Sky has turned into.
Absolutely.
I almost felt like if I was the people who made Astroneer, when I saw No Man's Sky's like update, I'd have been kind of pissed.
Now, I will say, so there's no, so I have a couple nitpicks with it. So firstly, there's also higher level gameplay that you can move on to. I haven't really spoiled myself by looking it all up, but I know that once you get to today, I have plans with a friend to tunnel to the center of the planet, because we know there's something down there. Ooh. But we haven't really spoiled ourselves to see what it is.
Spoiler, it's a giant fish from this terrible Star Wars movie.
And so I have plans to do that today. I'm very excited. But I do have a couple nitpicks about it. I know this isn't like a full review. We're not only talking about Astroneer, but I do have a couple.
We're just bitching about video games. That's all we're doing.
First thing is that the multiplayer is always hosted by one player. So if it's my save game, my friends can't go into it unless I'm playing. And if it's late at night and I want to go to bed and they want to stay up, I feel kind of bad that it's like everything's over. Also, it is, and this isn't really a nitpick, just something to know. I find it's like a very easy game. There's not a lot of risks or challenges. So in Minecraft or in No Man's Sky, there are monsters and dangerous animals, and there are a lot more hazards that you encounter in a lot of the similar games, survival games. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about food, you don't have to worry about water. It's just oxygen. That's the only thing that you need to survive. So you don't need to farm or anything, which I think makes it a lot easier of a game. You don't need to worry about feeding yourself.
It's more like a chill game and relaxing type game. It's
very chill, yeah. And then the space travel is exceedingly simple. You click to go to orbit, you click a planet, and you click a landing site. Whereas No Man's Sky has a very dynamic space travel system where you're flying your ship yourself, and you have to keep an eye on your fuel, and you sometimes have to get into dogfights because there's either there's a bounty on some ships that you want to go get, or you're getting attacked or something like that. So there's aerial dogfights in something like No Man's Sky, and in Minecraft you have to feed yourself and defend yourself against the hazards of the world. And so compared to those similar games, Astroneer is extremely calm, very easy, going. Definitely a great, I've been using it every time, like before I go to bed, I'll play like an hour and relax. So my
De-stress and
nitpicks
calm.
are not really negatives in any way. They're just, you know, things that you would want to know compared to those other space games.
So you'd recommend it to everybody as a chill game?
Yes, very much so. And there is for co-op of 4 people, and the developers have said that they really do want to release dedicated servers,
Nice.
sort of like Minecraft Realms, but it's been lower on the priority list to just, you know, game improvements and updates and stuff. So
They want to see that revenue come in before they spend that kind of money.
exactly. Well, I can only get, I don't want to assume, but I think that's the case.
Well, it seems like a reasonable assumption. Sounds like a pretty good game. I think we've reached that point where we're going to start talking about Star Trek Picard.
Oh yes, I'm so ready.
So the people that are still sticking around and listening to this, we're not gonna. If you've not seen the show yet, we're gonna have a little bit of an intro where we're not gonna talk spoilers. We're just gonna talk about impressions. What brought it. Our impression with Star Trek. Overall, why we were looking forward to the Picard and our non-spoilery impressions of the first episode, and then we'll clearly mark, hey, from the rest of this part on, it's spoilers. So if you guys are sensitive to those, you can kind of bow out. Sorry if you hear Buster bark in the background. I think the UPS guy came by. So Amanda, let's talk about your introduction to Star Trek. When did you first start enjoying Star Trek?
My mom was a huge Trekkie. So growing up, we watched the original series a lot, and it was sort of part of the rotation. So it was like Star Trek, A-Team, MASH. It was part of that rotation that was always on TV in syndication. And Star Trek, we watched a lot of the original series again and again and again and again because it's not a lot of episodes. And then, and I had only ever watched the original series until I was an adult, like in my 20s.
Oh, okay.
And I think I didn't watch Next Generation until I got Netflix, whenever Netflix came. And I got Netflix pretty early on. But whenever it came to Netflix, I started watching it and I just poured into it. I loved it so much. And it's so different from the original series, but with a lot of the same values, I'll say. Yeah. And a lot of the same themes and things. So, and it has a lot of what I'm looking for in sci-fi. So, it just captured my imagination instantly. And I go back and rewatch episodes all the time.
So, did you watch anything after that?
I watched Voyager as well. And I've seen... Of all Star Trek movies, I've probably seen, I want to say 50% of them.
Oh, okay.
I would say. But it just seems like there's a lot of them, and I could get confused with the timeline and stuff. And some of them are
well, there's like
doo-doo.
6 original series movies.
Yeah.
Then maybe four Next Generation movies. Mm-hmm. And then after Nemesis, they were like, start it over. And they brought in J.J. Abrams, who did the whole reboot thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I started watching the original series in syndications when I was very young at my grandparents' house after school. And then when I watched the premiere of TNG on TV when I was 9, 10 years old. And I watched all of TNG sort of as it aired. And then I when TNG was over, which was my favorite of all, I think the end of TNG is like the best example of how a show can go out with class and style and pay homage to the subject matter and be special all at the same time. The last episode was called All Good Things. It was like an hour episode. Or a 2-hour episode? Did you see that one?
Yeah, I've seen all of Next Generation, yeah. But I kind of have a stable of about 20 episodes that I go back to and watch.
I love TNG, but
I
was 9 or 10 when I watched it, and the first season is really hit and miss.
Mm-hmm. Some of them I like just because they're silly, but I probably would say that there's like maybe 20 episodes. I often will watch the 2-parters like sitting down to watch a movie. So I'll specifically say, okay, I'm going to go watch a 2-parter and just enjoy it like a movie.
The Borg one.
Oh gosh, yes.
So
good.
then I watched Deep Space Nine, but only about half of it. And I kind of gave up on it. I never watched any Voyager. I did go back, like you said, when they came to Netflix, and I watched Deep Space Nine, the end of it. And Deep Space Nine, some of the best Trek ever is the last 3 seasons of that show. But you could just start at season whatever the third to last one is and go, but it's really a slog to get through. And I've watched maybe a season and a half of Voyager, and I do plan on going back to Voyager, especially with Seven of Nine, Jerry Ryan Seven of Nine, who showed up in the trailers of Picard, being integral to this series.
Yeah.
I've seen all the movies. My wife and I, actually, one of our first dates was to go see the Generations movie together.
Oh my goodness! How old were you?
Shoot, I want to say 17, 18.
Aww.
Yeah, we saw it probably a year before we got married. But yeah, I love Star Trek, and when I don't know about you, but when I heard they were making a Picard series, I actually watched the Star Trek Las Vegas thing where he came out and talked to the crowd. Did you see that on YouTube?
I'm not sure I did. I haven't been watching a ton of stuff outside of maybe a couple late night interviews, and I try not to, when there's something I'm really looking forward to, I try really hard to kind of go in, not completely blind, but I try not to oversaturate myself with all the information before I go into it. So I haven't really watched a lot beyond the trailers for this.
I had heard about it, and I saw it on a tweet that Picard was going to come back, and they had this stage set up at Star Trek Las Vegas, which is a big Trek fest they have every year, I think. And they had the old orange sliding locking doors from TNG.
Yes.
They had one of those, and it opens up, Picard walks out,
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart, yeah. I was blanking on his name for whatever reason. Comes out, and he says, Picard is back. And then I started reading all these things about how he has a heavy say in, like, the production of it, and the writing. He's in the writing room. Yeah. And I went from casual optimistic to, like, a little worried.
Yes. I didn't know that until afterwards. Okay. Because I tried not to read anything until after I had seen the first episode, because I find that sometimes if I read advanced reviews or something, it really changes how I enjoy the episode, enjoy the show. And I even if something is like maybe critically not acclaimed, I want to be able to enjoy it if I enjoy it and not have that color my opinion of it. Absolutely. But when I went back and read about it, I learned that he had a lot of stipulations. And I think, to be honest, some of the limitations that he placed on, if I come back, these are the things that I will and won't do. I think that those really contributed to making an interesting story. Absolutely agreed. I know one of the things that he wanted was he had to have a dog, and it had to be a pit bull. Yes. I guess it's a banned breed in some parts in Europe. It is. And he is, Patrick Stewart and his wife, Sunny Ozell, are really big advocates of adopting pit bulls. And they'll when they have time, they'll foster a pit bull, and post a bunch about it on social media to try and show the softer side of this dog breed. And I know that's like a really big cause for them. It worked out pretty well. He was good in the episode. The dog acted very well. There's a part, this is not a spoiler, but there's a part where the dog's just like chilling out, and he's lying down, and he's doing that thing that pit bulls do where they put their feet straight out behind them. They don't rest on them like normal dog would. They look like a frog with their feet out behind them. Yeah, I had to go back and rewatch because it was so cute. Our dog Buster is an Australian cattle dog. He does that. We call it the super dog pose because he looks like he's like Superman with his arms and legs sticking straight out. But so my impression when going into the episode, I tend to do like you were saying in avoiding. The purpose, I think, of avoiding all media about it is to kind of keep your expectations in check, go in with an open mind, and not have any, pre-existing expectations for what it should or can be. And I went in kind of fearing that it was with all the talk about how reboots are never as good and how movies like long-time sequels are never great. Everyone's railing against all the new Star Wars movies.
I was kind of like, I hope this, because those characters are so dear to me because I grew up with them, that I was like, yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it. And I saw the trailer for it that had Data in one of the trailers, Commander Data from TNG, and I'm like, what have they done to his head? He doesn't look anything like he used to do, and I know he's old, but in the actor Brent Spiner is older now, but there is. I watched this movie called The Irishman a couple months ago where they digitally de-aged everybody. I'm like, okay, maybe they can't afford that. But despite those misgivings, but despite some of the things, my worries, without spoiling anything, the first episode was a great mix of nostalgia and action and introducing the new characters and kind of setting the table. I think we've got some nitpicks, but both of us do it. But I don't even feel like talking about them because it's like I actually have a friend of mine who grew up down the street from who emailed me yesterday and said, "What did you think of the new show?" And I'm like, he was like film critiquing it, he was like, "Well, there's some pacing here and character motivations, not buying these character motivations," and I said, yeah, I definitely caught a couple of those. I said, but I it almost feels nostalgic that the first episode of a Star Trek show is terrible. And it's not a terrible episode at all. It's really good. But like almost like the writers snuck in some cheesy stuff just to say, we got to keep the streak alive.
So that leads into my most important note. And it was the thing that I was most worried about, and the thing that I come out of most reboots feeling unsatisfied about. And that's that the main character that they're bringing back sometimes just doesn't feel right. They don't feel intact. It's been so long since they've been written and so long since they've been acted that the original character doesn't really seem intact anymore, and that was what I was most worried about. And
see him more as the actor instead of the character.
Yeah, I guess, and the character or the actor, maybe isn't completely back into the role yet, and instantly my worry was melted away. I just thought that and I'm guessing it's because so much of Jean-Luc Picard is in Patrick Stewart and vice versa, but that just the calm, grounded grace in that character was there from the first second, and it made me instantly feel comfortable that this is the same world as all the episodes that I've been rewatching. It's the same person, the same character, and just older, and it instantly made me feel at ease seeing that it was such a comfortable performance for him to just to fall right back into without it being different or off or a little bit like they were doing an impression of themselves at that time. So that was my biggest worry and the thing that I'm most happy about with the episode.
It's funny because I think I fall on the other side of the fence on that opinion. And then I really liked the episode, but in my opinion, Patrick Stewart's performance was the weakest part of it.
Oh, and wow.
I know. and I'll tell you why I say that.
Okay, go ahead.
It's not all on him either. There's a couple of scenes, and I'm not gonna name what he says, but where the scene where there's a part in the episode where he gets knocked unconscious and he wakes up and people are tending to him, and that part felt so rushed to me. It was like it was supposed to be. It was almost feels like it was written to be an inciting incident when he had already had the inciting incident for the plot, and like he woke up and just like the music swells and he's saying, "I must go do this thing now," and like it felt, and I felt like that line was rushed, and that may not be on Patrick Stewart. That may be on the way it was edited together, the way that was written, but it felt like there should have been more time there for them to kind of like stew in it, and for him to go from being unconscious to I'm going to make a huge life-changing decision right now without his friends nearby talking some sense into him. I think they try. They say, "Hey, you ask too much of yourself," the one gal says, and but I still think that that as a viewer, like I stopped and noticed what I thought was something in his acting there.
So that's actually one of my big nitpick too, is that the episode had a lot of exposition.
Yeah.
A lot of exposition. A lot of the lines were, telling instead of showing. And I think that that's just sort of to be expected with a first episode, but it doesn't mean that I have to like it.
Exactly. Did you ever watch the new Star Trek Discovery show?
I haven't caught up on it yet, but I have access to it now, so I'll probably be checking it out.
Well, I'm once you get a chance to watch it, I'm curious. What I'll warn you against is there is an opening, like before the title roll and the theme song and everything. There's a scene where the main character and her mentor are walking around on a planet, and it is so alien to the rest. No pun intended. They're on an alien planet with a bunch of creatures running around, but it is so unusual and different from the rest of the series that. When I went to rewatch Discovery this summer, I was like, "What? I forgot how terrible! What a terrible first impression this was. Because it's nothing like the show, and it almost felt to me like they were trying to placate, older fans with this section because it was they were doing Star Trek-y things. They were beamed down to a planet. They were walking around. They were looking for critters. They were trying to save something.
I did watch that first episode, and I remember I saw the first episode, and I remember thinking it reminded me of there's an episode of Next Generation where Picard and Will Wheaton are going down to.
Are you laughing because in your head you said Wheaton?
Wheaton, yeah. And they have there's like a shuttle driver driving them somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember the name of the episode, but and they have to
the final voyage or the final mission is what it's called.
They have an emergency landing on this desert planet, and they have to. It's a very important episode between Wesley and Picard, and it sort of cements their father-son dynamic. But I really felt that, and I remember now that you're, talking about that episode of Discovery, that first episode, I remember that I was like, okay, they're clearly trying to set up a similar relationship between these two characters as they did in that episode.
Yeah.
And I remember not feeling enough, interest to continue watching it, but on your recommendation, I'm very excited to now.
Well, a lot of older fans or longtime fans of Star Trek hate Discovery because what old Star Trek was Gene Roddenberry's vision of a perfect future for humanity. In Gene Roddenberry's vision, and Star Trek Picard is not in Gene Roddenberry's vision. Spoiler alerts. Actually, from here on out, guys, we're going to be talking spoilers for Picard. So if you don't want to hear about spoilers for Picard, I recommend that you hop to the next episode of the podcast, or wait till next week if you're listening to it within the week it came out. But Star Trek Picard is very much not in this perfect future where humanity has resolved all their differences. You may or may not know this, Amanda, but Gene Roddenberry famously didn't want interpersonal conflicts to be the main theming of any episodes or any kind of none of that drama. And it wasn't until I think Rick Berman and a few people kind of wrestled control of it away from him in his later years before he passed. And like Deep Space Nine is when, they started doing whole season arcs and story arcs, and they had personal conflicts between the characters of the show. And I assume Voyager did some more of that. I didn't watch
Voyager is like a telenovela.
Yeah. And that was kind of when I was younger and I loved Star Trek's perfect future story and feel. I couldn't get into Deep Space Nine and Voyager for those reasons, but Picard is definitely, it has not answered any of these things, but would you want to do a brief synopsis of the episode?
I can, yeah. So essentially it is Picard has left Starfleet because of after Nemesis, and I believe it ties into the movie a little bit in that.
Yeah, the J.J. Abrams 2009 movie and the Nemesis movie.
Yeah, exactly. It ties into both those films, but so in Nemesis, obviously, Data is destroyed, And
he sacrifices himself.
Yes.
And in the
and
2009
up,
J.J. Abrams reboot, there's a supernova on Romulus's planet. It goes boom. That still happened, and this isn't what they call the Kelvin timeline from those movies. This is what they left behind.
So when in the new modern movies, when Spock tries to prevent the supernova on Romulus and he gets sent to the J.J. Abrams timeline, this is the timeline he left behind, the timeline Spock left behind.
Yeah.
And because of all the they call them synths instead of androids, because of all the synths attacking, they're the impetus of the Romulan supernova, correct?
I've not. I didn't get that out of the movie or the show. I've watched it twice now. I watched it this morning just before we recorded this to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
What I understand is the supernova happened naturally. If I'm wrong about that, I'm sorry, but this is my impression of.
Oh yeah, you're right. I think the supernova happened naturally, but then there's something to do with the AI, the androids, the synths as they call them on the planet
Mars
prevented. Yeah, on wasn't it because it's Romulus it's Romulus versus the synths.
There's a supernova that happened, and they predicted it was coming, and it was an emergency. And Picard went and talked the Federation into on what is it? The shipyard at Planitia, something. Planitia.
Oh yeah, Planitia. Yeah.
I can't remember but basically at the shipyard at Mars, where it was all the time in the old TOS movies. There's tons of callbacks in this new show.
Yeah.
But they decided to start building these rescue craft. And during the production of those, the synths went to Mars and blew up the entire planet. They didn't blow it up. They caused a fire that burned off the what do you call
atmosphere.
it? The atmosphere, and it's still burning today. She says in that interview.
Mm-hmm. So that's what happened before the start of the episode, or before you join Picard on his vineyard. And Picard has that incident led to Starfleet banning all synths and synthetics and the production of and research of new synthetics. And Picard felt that this was against what Starfleet stood for, and that it was he couldn't stand around seeing this happen. He couldn't represent Starfleet knowing that they are, banning all synths and stuff like that. So he
that kind of goes back
leaves,
to that that episode Measure of a Man, where he gets that judge advocate general to say that synthetic life is still life and we must honor it and not ban it, and that's why he basically resigned when Starfleet took an anti-Romulan and anti-synth stance.
Yeah, basically he just can't. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to stand for. If that's what they're gonna take a stand on, he doesn't want to represent them. And he's back on his vineyard. He has some. He's alone. Like he doesn't have like a partner or anybody. Just his dog and the staff that he treats. They're like his family, just like the crew was technically his family.
You
but
notice
also
that
at the same time,
his people that he has with him are a pair of refugee Romulans.
Yes. Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah.
And I made a note that I thought the side characters were so incredible. The actors were so good.
Yeah.
And all the bit players in this are really great. I really like when side characters feel as dynamic and real as the main cast. So that was a note that I had.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I felt like Picard was maybe the worst, acting, because it's like, and it wasn't necessarily a shot at Patrick Stewart, because I thought he did fine at sometimes. I think he did great, but like the rest of the cast, there's no slouches in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically he's back on the vineyard, and it's the day of a big news interview, and they're supposed to talk about, more like the humanitarian side of things, and it's supposed to be kind of it's supposed to be kind of a like a memorial interview, and it's the first one he's done since he's left Starfleet. And learn through the characters talking, getting everything set up for the interview, that they're not supposed to talk about, why did you leave Star Trek? Was this your fault? Is that, what is your, it's not supposed to be a hard-hitting interview. It's supposed to be kind of a softball memorial. And of course they, in this live interview, they go off script, and the interviewer, the journalist just pushes Picard on, well, all the synths hurt all these people. How come you still stand for them? And are you responsible for all of this? And just turns it into like a really hard hitting interview. And he, walks out I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but he walks out of the interview, and we go to a totally new character. And this totally new character is a young woman who just got accepted to a fellowship at an AI.
Am I the only one who was distracted by her name was basically Doge?
Yeah.
I don't think her name is much character, much wow.
Dodge. Dodge.
Her name was Dodge, but I kept thinking Doge. I kept
Dodge,
pausing
duck,
it.
Dive, yeah.
I kept pausing it and looking at D while we were watching it, going, wow, such Star Trek.
I actually didn't think Doge. I was,
thinking the word Dodge.
Dodge, yeah. So, I thought it was Dodger. Like short for Dodge. I'm like, Dodger's a really cool name. I love it. No,
I know exactly what period thing you're talking about. There's an actual. She says Dodge when she introduces herself to some, or maybe it's her boyfriend who says it.
Yeah.
And then later on, when he's talking to the AI that runs his storage locker, basically,
Archive, yeah.
They're like, "What is the name of the painting?" And I thought that she said the AI said Dodger.
Yeah.
But no, she says daughter.
Yeah.
I asked Dee about it later. Did she say Dodger? And she goes, no, it's daughter.
I thought it was Dodger too. I was like, that's a cool name. I like it. So anyway, so you go to this, she's talking to her boyfriend about, oh my God, I got into this fellowship and I'm so excited. And then all of a sudden these hitmen beam into their apartment. And there's a huge fight. And
speak English, you idiot.
Yeah. And there's like a big fight, and she beats them all up, and unfortunately they kill her cute boyfriend. And
they're asking her, interrogating her, where are you from? Where are the rest of you? And she has no idea what they're talking about until they put a bag over her head, and then she kind of like everything slows down, she freezes up, and all of a sudden goes into like John Wick mode on them.
Yes, exactly. She beats them all up and martial arts is them, but she has, and then afterwards she's just standing there not realizing, she's sort of saying like, how do I know how to do this? How did I just wipe out all these people? And she's coming to grips with it, and she sees a vision of Picard's face. And then she's kind of running through the streets all disoriented, and she sees that interview that Picard was doing. She sees his name and his face, and she recognizes that she has to, she feels that he will help her. So she goes somehow, you don't see it happening, but she goes to the vineyard and talks to him and says, I don't know why, but I saw a vision, this is what happened. She just tells him right out. This is what happened, and this is, I felt like you would be able to help me. And Picard just is the nicest, sweetest, wonderful man, and is like, okay, we're going to take care of you. Don't worry. I'm going to keep you safe. And that night he has another dream. So in the, the opening scene, he has a dream that he's playing poker with Data on the,
Don't you dare call him Data. He hates that.
I didn't. So in the opening, he has a dream that he's playing poker with Data and above Mars burning. And so then this night that Doge is sleeping over, he has another dream that Data is out in his vineyard painting a young woman, and says, here, you finish the painting. I think you know how to finish it. He wakes up and she's gone. The girl is gone.
And he notices that fainting in his study.
Mm-hmm. And he notices the painting that data. And now you've screwed me up.
One is his name, the other is not. You remember that episode? Where they're like, he calls him Data, and he goes, ma'am, it's Data. And they go, what's the difference? He goes, one's my name and one's not.
Well, now that you've said it, I keep thinking it.
Oh, okay.
So he sees the painting in his study that Data painted. And he remembers that there is a companion painting, a second painting, that is in his storage, his Starfleet storage archives. So he goes to his archives, and it is like a trove of Easter eggs that I'm sure that you'll go into when we're done the summary. And he sees, they bring out the painting, and he sees, in the study, her face is obscured. In this one that he has in the archives, he can see the face of the woman in the painting, and it's Dodge. And the name of the painting, as the AI says, is Daughter. Or as I call it, Lol to Electric Boogaloo. And
he always wanted a daughter.
Yeah, exactly. He always wanted a daughter. And so he realizes, he in this moment is like, okay, she's, got to have a connection to Data. Do you want to take over? Or do you want me to keep summarizing?
I mean, basically, that's the meat of it. He goes to the Daystrom Institute, which is big, all the way back from the original series that they've been talking about this cybernetics place, and talks to the gal there, finds out that Commander Maddox from TNG and Data and her have been working all this time. Even after Data was destroyed, they tried some kind of experiment to reconstitute Data as a living synthetic cellular organism, and it's revealed that Daj and Daj's twin were reconstituted. It's basically heavily implied that happened. So they need to go start looking for. Picard runs into Daj later on. There's another fight, and she's killed. And then he talks to the cyberneticist again, or it might have been before, I don't remember, finds out there's a twin. So he basically then decides what we need to do is go find her sister. And that's kind of where we leave Picard. And then they cut to Daj's sister, whose name is, do you remember?
Asher.
Asher?
Asher?
No, Doja's sister. That's on the Romulan, with the Romulan guy.
Isn't her name Asher?
It could be, but it cuts there to her. She meets some Romulan guy who's, doing shifty eyes at the camera. They did everything but do dun 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 at the end to say that he's definitely a bad guy. At least that's the impression they're trying to give. And they have a conversation about how he's new there and blah blah blah, and they're clearly setting him up to be like this inside villain. And then the camera zooms out, and they're inside a Borg cube. And it said it was a Romulan reclamation site. So clearly if you don't know, if you've made it this far, you don't know who Borg are. I don't know what to tell you, but they're basically the villain from TNG, the synthetics from TNG. So it kind of adds this element of, are the synthetics Romulan allies? Are they Borg? Are they what? So it's basically, It's basically, that's the commercial, the big reveal to credits. And it was really, really, really well done and balanced. I say that, I do have the nitpicks that we talked about earlier, but I don't think they're crazy bad. I think they're just...
well, nothing is perfect.
Right, exactly. But one thing that Amanda alluded to earlier was that, there were a ton of Easter eggs, and I caught several of them, but I didn't catch them all. There was a article published yesterday about 13 Easter eggs you may have missed, and I'm going to grill you on these, Amanda, and see how many of them.
Okay, I'll try and remember them. I've sent you a copy of my live notes in Discord.
Oh, I see that.
So you can see those if you want to look at them and ask me about them in a bit. Okay. But let's go through your Easter eggs first.
All right. Here, let's see how many of these you caught, and I'll tell you whether I got them too. This one, I knew it was particular, but I didn't pick up that the opening song, the show cuts to a nebula, and it's playing Blue Skies.
Bing Crosby.
Yeah, but do you know why they chose that song for this?
I don't.
It's the song that Data sings at Riker and Troy's wedding in Star Trek Nemesis.
Oh, wow.
And it's also at the end of Nemesis. It's what B4 after they put his who is in the episode, by the way. B4's body is anyway. They show B4 humming the tune at the very end of Nemesis too, which Nemesis is not a great movie. I still enjoyed it. I was entertained by it, but obviously the poker game. You understood the references to the old poker games from TNG, I would imagine.
Yeah, but one thing that kind of upset me, just since you're talking about it, is that it feels like they retconned, because it was supposed to be. I feel like in Nemesis, it was like, okay, B4 they kind of implied like he's gonna have all of Data's memories, and he survived.
They kind of glossed over that in this episode.
And I felt that I was a little unsatisfied by their explanation of why they couldn't bring.
They basically said he was too
fancy.
He was too simplistic to take all of his stuff. That's why they decommissioned him. But did you get the other in that poker game? Did you get the other reference when Data laid down 5 Qs or 5 queens?
No, tell me.
It's a reference to John Delancey's Q from the TNG episodes.
Oh, okay.
And there's rumor, I've not seen it substantiated yet, there's rumor that John Delancey's been asked to come back for season 2. So that'll be interesting.
Him and Guinan together, him and Guinan need to have a fight.
They finally have their fight to the doom that they always teased in TNG. Yeah. You talked about the Daystrom Institute. But did you know the Daystrom Institute was talked about in nearly every series of Star Trek?
I didn't know it was in every series, but I feel like it's something you hear about so much. And then when Dodge is like, "Oh, I've got accepted to the Daystrom Institute," I was like, "Why does that still exist?" Because they're not allowed to make sense, and that is a question that I have written in my notes.
Well, they did explain it that it's. They
did, but I just was like, it's a whole institute.
It's where they say they only run simulations now.
Yes.
The opening title, the opening bars of the show's theme. There's a slight bit of a flute playing at the beginning.
Picard playing his flute.
Yes, they said that from the episode, "The Inner Light" can be heard, and Inner Light's one of the more famous TNG episodes. I did really like this next one, tea, Earl Grey, decaf.
Yes, I loved that.
And that to say he's a little older, and also like there's a scene where he and Dodge are running from the bad guys, or they're chasing something to get away, and he's like, "Slow down" on the stairs. He couldn't quite.
I would like to point out that if you look in my notes, my live notes, I say, "Jesus, look at him book it." That man had a great starting Dex roll.
Oh man!
Because I feel for his age, he was incredibly, and just like his gait, when he's just walking around, he has a very energetic gait for someone of his, his.
Do you mind if
age.
I share what you said about him earlier to me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was we were scheduling this, so I sent her a message on Discord earlier, and I'm like, I'm sitting there playing Horizon Zero Dawn, just kind of having some breakfast, and she sends a picture of him with his dog, and she says, "I would climb that man like a tree." I about spit my drink out while I was reading that.
I definitely have a thing for older gentlemen, and Picard is just the cream of the crop. He
is the oldest and most gentlemanist.
Right?
He's 79, I think, now, or he was when they filmed this. All right, callbacks to TNG episodes and films. When the FNN, Federation News Network reporter, quickly recaps Picard's Starfleet history, they show him in they talk about his diplomatic stint on the Klingon homeworld and Sins of the Father. Production still of him in his white dress uniform from Insurrection. And then they show him in his him seated in either First Contact or Nemesis. This article wasn't sure. Utopia Planitia is the name of the shipyard.
Utopia Planitia.
Sorry, all you Star Trek nerds who are like, "It's Utopia Planitia, you idiots."
I think there's really there's a crater on Mars that they land in that's actually called, in real life, the Utopia Planitia. That's the name of the actual geographic location on Mars.
I think you're right. I actually learned that from Doom of all places. During Picard's second dream of Data, the dream sequence features Data and Picard wearing their redesigned TNG uniforms from season 3. One of the crazy things about the first dream sequence is they're wearing uniforms that never existed on the D. And I thought, oh, that's a continuity error. But what it is it's them cueing the audience that this is a dream. Because that first one, you're not sure. You're like, what the hell is this scene?
Yeah, there was a few times where I was unsure if something was a dream or not. Because it was the first episode back, so I wasn't sure if he was playing with before or if he was playing. I was kind of unsure during the dream sequences if that they were dreams, and I had that in my nitpicks, and then I realized that we're supposed to feel unsettled because Picard's. I feel like they made Picard such a comforting, caring character in this episode, and his role is really in a support role to the new character Dodge in the beginning. Yeah, exactly. And you can see that he's projecting this calm and nurturing and support, but then on the inside you can see he's so conflicted and upset. And there's the line that you said was kind of over the top. He said, I haven't been living. I've just been sitting here waiting to die. Yeah. Which is melodramatic, but at the same time, it's like you can see that he's trying to be strong and calm for the people he's supporting around him, like he was in the original, in Next Generation. But that inside, he's got all these conflicts and demons that are like he's struggling with. So
the more we talk about it, the more I think it might have been editing. Like it was one of the things that I read about after I watched the first episode when I was reading some reviews is a lot of like critics were saying that it had pacing issues, and I agree with that. I didn't look for them, but they jumped off the screen at me. But I don't care. I mean, so let's talk about Picard's storage room.
Yeah, I saw a ton. So now I've only seen it the one time, and I was going to rewatch it, and then I thought, no, I'm just going to leave my notes. But I noticed the Batleth. Mm-hmm. I noticed the Enterprise. I noticed a bunch of things, but in my memory, the main thing I noticed was the Batleth.
There was a Captain Picard Day banner from that episode.
Yes, with the kids. Yep, I noticed that too.
The ship with the 4 nacelles on it that looked like it was from TOS. That was the Pegasus, which is his first commission as a captain. Yeah, he lost it. Remember the episode where they go find it inside the asteroid, and Riker has this big fight with Admiral Pressman.
Yeah, he has a.
The captain's yacht from the Enterprise E was there. That was the little shuttle-looking thing. Mm-hmm. We saw the Batleth you mentioned, a Klingon ceremonial dagger from the events of Sin's of the Father. The captain's yacht, which was called the Consteur. It's what is it? Cousteu? Cousteau? You speak French.
So can you send it to me in the thing so I can read it?
Yes,
and I'll tell you about it.
It's his personal yacht. I remember them talking about it in the show, or in the movie, but I don't remember how to say it.
If you show me the word, I'll probably be able to.
I just sent it to you.
Oh, okay, let me take a look here. Cousteau, like Jacques Cousteau.
Oh, okay. I feel real. I know who Jacques Cousteau is, but I guess I haven't seen his name in writing on this. I used to watch Jacques Cousteau. And then obviously we saw that scene in the Institute of B4. We saw him just as we saw him last, in pieces disassembled and relegated to a storage bin. We learned that Data's attempt to download his memories into his inferior copy of himself ultimately failed. The procedure resulted in the near total loss of all Data was, because Data is unique and no one in Starfleet has been able to replicate that success, not even Dr. Bruce Maddox. Do you remember the episode of Maddox?
He was...
The Measure of the Man,
see
the
him
trial.
In my mind. He's like a young guy in the TNG. Yeah, I kind of remember him, but I didn't go back and rewatch his episode because
I'm almost positive that he's going to show up.
Like a young guy. He was the actor was quite young, so I'm sure he can show up in this and
Well, because they say he's disappeared. I'm like, you don't just drop that kind of line without.
That's an iron in the fire.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems to me that this series has got a bright future with a young, great cast, but it's anchored in deep in TNG lore, and I think it did the impossible. As much as I may have nitpicked about it here and there, it has basically done its past a good service of bringing those characters and their stories and their character traits and things that they fight for and are fought for and still believe in, and they've set it up in, quote unquote modern to Patrick Stewart's age's time.
Yeah. That's one thing that I want to say was it wasn't all nostalgia. Like, if there was Easter eggs, but it wasn't kicking a dead horse of nostalgia. There was just those little Easter eggs. It wasn't, he didn't do like engage. He was just the character was still there, and all those ideas were still there, but it was so fresh feeling and new feeling, and I was just so excited to see him outside that normal role, and I just am really, really excited for the rest of this show.
So here's one thing I'm gonna urge you to do. I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a Discovery spoiler because I think it's gonna help inspire people who both listen to this who have never watched Discovery, and I know you haven't watched it yet, but there's a tie-in with Discovery and what's happening right now.
Okay.
And I'm not going to tell you how or why, but the end of Discovery is a prequel to the original series. And Kirk and Spock, not Kirk, but the original captain of the Enterprise A, Captain Pike, and Spock and a bunch of people show up in Discovery. And season 2 of Discovery ends with the Discovery jumping forward 1,000 years in time.
Ooh.
And there's one of the main villains that emerges throughout the series is a synthetic organism called AI.
Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, like I said, I can't tell you that it's directly related, but oh my God, they're definitely going to tie this together. They have to. It's like, it's obvious. Because 1,000 years, I've seen some nerds talking about it online, the jumping point between Discovery's Jump to the Future and when this takes place is like within a year or two. So like my guess is that the rogue AI or the Borg or somebody like that is going to be involved in why the synths have gone crazy or gone rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Or
now I'm very excited to watch it.
Huh?
Now I'm very excited to watch it. Have you looked at my wonderful live notes?
I have. I've looked over them. I didn't know how much of these you wanted to talk over. Was it a bad dream? Things that jump out at me. Can't stop crying because Picard is so wonderful. I miss Data. I just watched the episode and he did where he did poetry reading about
Spot. Yes. Oh gosh.
Oh my God, it's LOL 2 Electric Boogaloo, and then later on you're like, oh my God, LOL 3. It's like, okay, whew, I could save the backup.
Oh, and then the bad guy, the Romulan bad guy that Asher meets, who I'm like 99% sure that Dodge's sister's name is Asher. Mm-hmm. As soon as I saw it, I was like, look, it's Romulan Bunny Ball.
So
I'm gonna have to do a side by side for.
If we haven't talked about it, one of the people that we play Siege with every week is named Bunny Ball, and he does look remarkably like this actor.
Did you think that too?
I not until you said it, but once I read this note, I'm like, no, she's 100% right. That's crazy. Kevin Uxbridge would be incredibly excited about these developments. You've been listening to Greatest Generations.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Well, three lols? Are you kidding me?
Right? Psych, they live in a Borg cube. Yeah. Episode is a lot of exposition, but I think it's expected. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I read about, in fact, I'm anxiously waiting for, I may have told you this, and I may have mentioned this in the pod before, but one of the main reasons I started a podcast is because I fell in love with this Star Trek podcast called The Greatest Generation. And those guys got invited to go to the premiere of this Picard. And they get to watch the first 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. So what the cast and crew, the producers were calling Chapter 1. So I think one of the reasons this was exposition heavy is like it was probably produced. A lot of times they'll show a 2-parter to start a show. Mm-hmm. I think it was produced as probably 3 whole. I think those 3 episodes are all really one story or one segment. So I think it's going to be a lot more balanced if you watch it like Netflix style, just binge it.
Yeah, I have incredibly high hopes. After I had lukewarm hopes going into it, but the first episode really set up very high hopes for me.
Well, hopefully you guys who are listening are still entertained by us here at an hour and 14 minutes in. But I
think my silly notes helped.
Yeah, exactly. I think having the two Star Trek fanatics being here, really is going to lead to a longer episode. But we do appreciate you guys who are still here sticking it out to the end.
Exactly. Thank you for listening to our inane babbling about Star Trek.
Well, Amanda, if people want to check you out online or on social media, how would they go about that?
So you can go to realamandalive.com. I have a bunch of voice demos there, and if you're looking to hire me for voice work, you can contact me through that website, realamandalive.com. On Twitch, I'm realamanda, and on Twitter, I'm realamanda as well. Nice.
You can find me on at CrunkyTTV with 2 N's on Twitter, or you can find me on Twitch a couple nights a week at twitch.tv/Crunky, again with 2 N's. Thank you, Amanda, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to talking to you about episode 2.
Me too.
And depending on how this podcast goes, let me know if you liked this or you didn't like us talking about a TV show. I know Cherry and I have done a couple of Simpsons episodes in the past, and I'm curious to see what you guys think of it. You can at me on Twitter. You can at Amanda. You can talk to me on my Discord, on my Twitch channel, or on Amanda's channel. Anywhere you can find us, let us know how it goes, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.